Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants Hangout. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I will be your host for today. Really excited for another virtual field trip down to Virginia. We are hanging out at the Virginia Zoo in Norfolk, and they're going to introduce us today to one of the largest mammals on Earth, the White Rhinoceros. So we're really lucky to have Suzanne joining us. She's a zookeeper at the zoo, and we're going to learn a little bit today about the rhinos, about conservation, and maybe what we can do to help protect this incredible species. So Suzanne, so great to have you joining us, and we're excited to learn a little bit more about your guests in the background.
All right, thanks for having me. So the Virginia Zoo houses 3 southern white rhinos. Their names are Sabindi is the boy, and Bora and Xena are the girl rhinos. So Sabindi, you're looking behind me, is on this side, and Bora and Xena are on the other side. Bora is the one closest to me, and Xena is currently standing behind her. They may change positions as we go along. So Sabindi is the largest, and he is the oldest. He's approximately 13 years old because he was actually originally wild caught from Kruger National Park. Bora and Xena were both born at the Singapore Zoo and brought to the Virginia Zoo a couple of years ago now, almost. And so they're a nice little family.
All right, very cool. Well, can you tell us a little bit about what you have to do each day to look after these very, very big animals?
Okay, so our 3 white rhinos, they participate in an operant conditioning program or a training program. So they are all 3 trained for voluntary blood draws, either from an ear vein or a front leg vein. And they're also trained to open their mouth, to lean in on each side, just so we can check everything out, like their feet, their mouth, blood samples for anything that our veterinarians might need, or for any like reproductive studies in the future. We can bank blood for the future. So my typical day is we get here about 8 o'clock. I help take care of all of the animals in this building, which includes giraffe and bongo and some other species as well. So the rhinos get breakfast in the morning. They are in the building overnight, and then they come out onto exhibit. They get a pelleted grain diet twice a day, so once in the morning and once at night. It kind of looks like if you have a rabbit or a guinea pig at home, it looks like the little pellets that you would feed them. And then they get primarily Timothy hay, which is a mixed grass hay, because white rhinos are grazers, as opposed to some of the other rhino species, which are browsers. They also get alfalfa hay occasionally. We use that primarily for behind-the-scenes tours and for our training program. They will eat a little bit of fruits and vegetables, but they're not huge fans of it. Xena really likes cantaloupe, honeydew, watermelon. She really likes those really well, but the other 2 don't seem to care as much as she does. And so we prepare the exhibit. We put out some hay in the morning, and then we let the rhinos out after we do our training program just to check them all over. They all 3 go out together during the day. And then at the end of the day, we bring them in, and they get more food. We do throw hay a couple of times during the day. So there are 5 species of rhino in the world. Southern white rhinos, black rhinos, greater one-horn rhinos, Sumatran rhinos, and Javan rhinos, all of which are endangered. White rhinos are the least endangered, or at least the southern white rhino subspecies is the least endangered. And then black rhinos have a population of about 5,500 in the wild. Southern white rhinos, there's about 18,000. Greater one-horn rhinos, there's about 3,500. Sumatran rhinos and Javan rhinos are critically endangered. So Javan rhinos, there's only about 70 of them, and there's less than 80 of Sumatran rhinos.
All right. And then, Suzanne, can you tell us a little bit about the threats that rhinos do face in the wild? why so many species are so critically endangered?
So, according to the International Rhino Foundation, a rhino in Africa, which would primarily be a southern white rhino or a black rhino, there's one poached every 8 hours. So they are poached for their horn. Their horn is made of keratin, which is the same that's in your hair and fingernails, with a calcium core. It has been scientifically proven that it has no medicinal properties, but traditionally in a lot of Middle Eastern countries and Asian countries, it has been used as a medicine. And a lot of the conservation effort needs to go into educating the younger generation that it is not scientifically proven to do anything. So they are still being poached for their horn, like I said. And was just in Africa, the every 8 hours.
All right. And one more question before we let our classrooms take over. Now, most people, when they go to the zoo, they think about it as a place to go and see animals. But a lot of people don't really know there's a lot of really good conservation work that happens at zoos. Can you speak a little bit to that and maybe the conservation work that happens for species like these white rhinos?
Yes. So the American Association of Zookeepers, which is a national organization, which also incorporates some keepers from Canada as well as keepers in Europe. They do a national fundraiser, well, almost an international fundraiser at this point, called Bowling for Rhinos. And they actually raise over $600,000 annually. Our Virginia chapter is called the Tidewater AZAC chapter, and they have raised over $18,000 since they started hosting this event. So the zoo helps support our AZAC chapter, and it also supports AZAC National by donating money to Bowling for Rhinos. Bowling for Rhinos helps protect 4 of the 5 species of rhino around the world. So it's a very good organization. So if you ever hear about a Bowling for Rhinos event in your community, you should definitely attend to help raise funds to conserve these species.
All right. Well, I think it's time to start meeting some of our classrooms and let's take some of their questions. So let's take a trip now. Let's see. Let's go to Mrs. Irwin's group. They're joining us from Parker. They are a mixed group of students joining her. Let's get their microphone turned on and see how they're doing today. How we doing, boys and girls? Good. Oh, nice big group of students. Which state is Parker in?
Colorado.
Awesome. Well, whoever's got our first question, nice and loud, we're ready.
Right here, can you see? There you go. Nice and loud.
Do the rhinos recognize and bond with their keepers?
Yes, they do recognize and bond with us keepers. Since we do that operant conditioning program that I was talking about, the training, it helps us actually be able to scratch them, or if we need to clean a wound, and they get really used to the keeper's voice and even like some of our body language. They kind of know what position they need to be in. And obviously they do everything voluntary, so they really want to participate for extra treats. But yes, they do get to know their keepers quite well.
All right. Awesome question to start us off. Let's take a little trip to Mrs. Pearson's grade 3-4 is hanging out with us in Calgary, Alberta. Let's get their microphone turned on and see how they're doing. How are we doing, Calgary?
Good.
What inspired you to work there?
I'm sorry, could you repeat it?
What inspired you to work there?
Work here as a zookeeper.
What do I need?
Like, what inspired you?
Oh, what inspired me to work here? I have worked at a few zoos, and honestly, like when I was a kid, I kind of wanted to be a veterinarian, but then I got to the point where I decided I would rather take care of healthy animals instead of the sick ones. No offense to any veterinarian wannabes out there, but you need to realize if you go into that profession that you're almost always going to be dealing with maybe not quite so healthy animals. Whereas with zookeeping, I get to see them every day. So I get to bond with them. We get to train them. We get to do enrichment with them. So we get to give them toys or things that can, make them eat longer. So I don't know. I've kind of just always loved animals, and I have a fondness for the larger African hoofstock. So elephants, rhinos, and giraffes.
All right, very cool. You picked the right place. You've got some nice big ones behind you.
Yeah.
Let's see. Mrs. Reed's fifth graders are hanging out with us in Algonquin. And just correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's Virginia. Let's get your microphone turned on.
Oh, and it's Illinois. They know we're in Illinois.
We're in Illinois.
Perfect. All right. Illinois, how are we doing?
How are we doing, guys?
Good.
Go.
What's the difference between a browser and a grazer?
Difference between a browser and a grazer.
Difference between a browser and a grazer. Sorry, we had some chainsaw noise in the background, so it's really hard to hear that question. Okay, so white rhinos are grazers. So I kind of touched on that briefly. So in the wild, they would eat primarily grasses. So white rhinos actually don't have any front teeth. And if you kind of look at them in the background, they're almost almost sucking in their hay. They have these giant lips. So the name white rhino actually is a mistranslation of an African word, which means wide, as in wide mouthed or wide lipped. So they're you can kind of see Sabindis right here. Maybe, I don't know. It might be a little bit out of reach, but they're really wide lips, and they kind of clamp onto the grass and pull it. That's why we feed primarily hay here. So grazers eat primarily grasses, whereas browsers eat plants off of trees, leaves off of trees. Sorry, that didn't make any sense. So like giraffes are usually considered browsers. Sometimes bongo are, and actually almost all, really all the other 4 species of rhino are actually browsers as well, because they all have a smaller head and actually a pointed lip. And the pointed lip almost acts like a little extra tongue or a finger, if you will, and they can actually curl it. If you've ever seen a tapir's mouth, it's very similar. They can curl it and grab a small branch or grab leaves off of the trees and shrubs. So that's the difference between browser and grazer.
All right, good question. And I want to give a reminder. I know there's some classrooms who are tuning in, watching us live on YouTube today. If you're on the YouTube page on the right, there should be a chat sidebar. So let us know where you're watching from and send in a question or two, and we'll make sure we work some of those in. But for now, let's go to, let's see, Mrs. Evans. 4th graders are joining us in Rapid City. Let's get their microphone turned on and see how they're doing today. How are we doing, Rapid City?
Do you know what you are going to do with the last 2 northern rhinos? Northern white rhinos? Oh. Do you know what you're going to do with the last 2 northern white rhinos?
The last 2 northern white rhinos, I believe, are housed in Africa now at a conservancy, Old Peheta, if I'm correct. They are being monitored closely, obviously, and their health is being monitored closely. Unfortunately, at this point, I know San Diego Zoo is doing a lot of reproductive studies to eventually use frozen materials from rhinos that have passed to potentially do a procedure where possibly a southern white rhino could give birth to a northern white rhino. But it's very complicated, very technical, just in the really, really early stages of the process. San Diego website, I'm sure, has a lot of information. Want to check that out. But yeah, it will be a very delicate process, and it may or may not happen within the next 10 to 20 years. we'll just see how quickly that they get the rhinos trained for the procedures and see if they can develop the science to the point that that would be a viable option. Otherwise, unfortunately, the northern white rhino subspecies will go extinct in our lifetime.
All right. And just to add to that, funny enough, it just happened last night. We got the opportunity. We had an event this morning where we hosted a National Geographic photographer from Kenya, and she was with the last 2 white rhinos. So if teachers want to check that out afterwards, I can send them the link. But Suzanne's absolutely right. There's 2 females left, and they're trying to figure out a way to use science to hopefully keep the species going. But there's still work to be done. But yeah, pretty interesting story, and it's a sad story. Just really goes to show that we're having a huge impact on our planet. And those white rhinos, there were 4 of them originally, and they were all in zoos, and then they were moved to Kenya, hopefully as a way to save the species. But yeah, it's a challenge. It's a big challenge. So that's a really good question. And if you want to check out more about those 2 northern white rhinos, we can help you out with that too. Mrs. Barha's class are joining us in Oxnard, California. Let me get their microphone on. We're doing
Oh, hi.
How are we doing, California?
Good. What is the largest rhino species?
White rhinos are the largest weight-wise. Greater one-horns can actually be taller than white rhinos. White rhinos usually max out around 6,000 pounds. Greater one-horn rhinos, I think, if I remember correctly, max out about 5,000 or 5,500. So it just kind of depends on the size of the rhino. Unfortunately, right now, the Virginia Zoo does not have an adequate scale for our rhinos, but based on other rhinos that I've worked with, I would say that our male is probably around 4,500 pounds, and our females are around 4,000 pounds each.
All right. Well, they're certainly not camera shy. It's great to see them nice and close, mugging for the camera.
Yeah, they're hoping for more snacks.
Fair enough. Mrs. Thiessen's group, they are joining us from Surrey, British Columbia. We've got some grade 3s hanging out with us. Let's get their microphone turned on. How are we doing, grade 3s?
Woo!
All right. Who's up?
We are wondering, sorry, what was the question? My blind just went totally blank. We were wondering if all rhinos were the same color. Did they all use camouflage?
Yeah, they all pretty much range from a light gray to a dark gray in color. Sumatran rhinos, I think, too, based on the mud where they're from, they may even be almost like a brown color. So they're all like gray to brownish in color. The Sumatran rhinos and Javan rhinos are in heavily forested areas. So obviously them being gray, like a dark gray to a brown color, helps them camouflage in the forest. White rhinos and black rhinos are more in the savanna. So they will, I mean, you know, it's dusty. I don't know that they camouflage quite as well, because white rhinos can be seen in herds or a crash of rhinos, if you've heard that term. So they sometimes will hang out in more of a group. So I would think the camouflage probably wouldn't work quite as well for them.
All right. Well, we're going to swing back to Mrs. Irwin's class. I know that they have to leave for lunch soon, so let's get one more question from your group.
All right, we have Sterling. Sterling, go ahead.
Does the Virginia Zoo have other endangered species? And if so, what are they?
Could you hear? Could you hear?
Yeah, I think so. asking about endangered species at the Virginia Zoo.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So white rhinos are an endangered species. They are part of the species survival plan that the AZA accredited zoos participate in. We are hoping that they will breed in the future and that we will have baby rhinos. There are lots of species here at the zoo that are endangered. Our eastern bongo are endangered. You know, there's a lot, and I don't work with all of them. So between the reptile department and the Asia team and everything else at the zoo, there are several endangered species here at the zoo. Orangutan, that's a good one. Yes, and we have a young orang that is about 6 months old, 7 months old. So yeah, there are quite a few different endangered species that we have here at the zoo.
All right, let's get back to Mrs. Pearson's class and get your microphone turned on for another question.
Why are the rhinos hunted, and how are the horns used?
Okay, so they are hunted. They're poached, actually, illegally poached, for their horn, which means they're killed for their horn, unfortunately. The horn itself is traditionally thought of as it can be medicinal, and there are also some countries that use rhino horn as a ceremonial, like, status symbol. So they will actually pass down from generation to generation daggers made out of rhino horn that are ornately carved. Unfortunately, that's probably the primary reason that they're being poached is because they are used in some traditional medicine, even though it is illegal. But there are a lot of countries that still believe that it has medicinal properties, even though, like I said, it is scientifically proven that it does not. So it's a very unfortunate situation. It needs a lot of education.
Yeah, it's frustrating that something that's made of the same thing as our fingernails and our hair, due to some, miscommunication, miseducation, is putting these beautiful animals at risk. It's pretty frustrating. Mrs. Evans' class, your microphone's on again.
Will rhinos fight each other?
Rhinos fight each other. Sometimes they'll kind of play spar with each other. If males in the wild probably enter each other's territory, they might fight more aggressively. Here at the zoo, ours are they fight kind of more like brothers and sisters, even though that they're not. Sometimes they might bicker over food or just like attention. And they may end up with a few like minor cuts and scrapes on them, but they heal pretty quickly as well because their skin is really vascular. So it might bleed a lot when they first get nicked, but then it heals pretty quickly. But yeah, they just kind of more, play spar, if you will.
All right, Mrs. Barha's class, do you have another question?
What ways are you trying to protect the rhinos from going extinct? And what ways are you keeping the poachers away?
A lot of the places where there are poachers now have rhino protection units, which are made up of usually the local people that are trained to go out and protect them. Some rhinos even have almost like individual teams that protect them. So a lot of places use rangers, rhino protection units that are actually armed and can arrest poachers. There's also a lot of technology being used to just keep track of the rhinos. And just protect them that way.
All right, and Mrs. Thiessen's grade 3, is your microphone's on?
All right, we sort of had two questions. One had to do with the horn. Can a rhino horn be removed without killing the rhino? And our second one was something you said. You said they like to play with toys, and we were wondering what toys rhinos play with.
Okay, first question. Technically, yes, you could remove a rhino horn without killing the rhino. However, you would actually have to anesthetize them. There's been a few places that have thought that would be a deterrent to poaching, which may work to a certain extent. There's some varied theories out there on whether that's true or not. The problem is that their horn kind of continuously grows depending on whether they shape it themselves on like fences or rocks or trees or by sparring. So there's always enough horn there, and it is unfortunately a very valuable commodity right now, that removing the horn on a semi-regular basis is extremely expensive and can still be possibly life-threatening to the rhino. Anesthetizing rhinos frequently can be quite detrimental to them. It just depends on the situation. It's been done several times in captivity. We try not to do it more than a couple times a year if necessary. Sometimes we don't at all. And then back to Rhino Toys. Our white rhinos here at the zoo tend to like stuff that they can push around. So they get very large, what are called boomer balls, or they might get a very large spool. We have a thing that's like a giant like weeble that actually wobbles when they push on it. They even like stuff like grain, if we have grain tubs that have like rips in them or whatever, they'll push those around. Some of the other things we can do scent enrichment. We can give them big boxes. The white rhinos, even though they are grazers, will eat a little bit of bamboo leaves sometimes, so we can give them a little bit of browse. They have some dead trees out here in the exhibit that they've been pushing around quite a bit too, so it's more of a natural toy, so to speak. But yeah, there's lots of options. Sometimes we even do like maybe chalk drawings on the inside just for something different for them to look at as well.
All right, and to wrap us up today, one more trip to Mrs. Reed's classroom.
How old can rhinos be? Like, how old can they be before they die?
Rhinos usually live about 45 to 50 years. You will occasionally find rhinos that are older than 50, and then obviously the same with people or your dog or your cat. Obviously, rhinos can have things happen to them where they don't live that long as well, but it does seem like white rhinos in captivity will live about 45 to 50 years.
All right. Well, a huge thank you to our classrooms today. Thank you so much for the great questions and hanging out with us today. Big thank you to the team at the zoo. I know Emily's probably behind the camera. Suzanne, thank you so much for being in front of the camera with the questions. And of course, a huge thank you to our stars, the white rhinos. They were very well behaved today.
Thanks.
All right. The last thing I'll do is turn all the microphones on in the classrooms. Boys and girls, if you want to get nice and loud, say goodbye and thank you. Hopefully the rhinos can hear as well. So here we go. Nice and loud. All right. Thanks again, everyone, for hanging out today. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we look forward to our next trip to the Virginia Zoo. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.